everybody. So today we are working on the Coptic Stitch. I'm going to give you sort of an overview and run you through how to do this both as a flat and in the round stitch. So this is a darning needle, flat, large stainless steel needle that you can pick up just about anywhere. You can also use your plastic craft needle. Any type of large blunt-ended needle is something you can use. You are not required to use a special needle if you don't want to. You can start with any style that you would like. I also have this bone needle, which was made from the rib of a boar. This antler needle, which I carved for myself to suit my style and standards. And this lovely wood ash needle that was made by one of my students. I am actually going to use my antler needle because it is my favorite. You can tell by this, the soft patina on it. You do not have to use any special tools. This is not a requirement for this type of craft. If all you have is a plastic needle or a craft needle or a darning needle, that's perfectly fine. I do strongly suggest using some type of wool yarn. You can use applied yarn like this Cascade yarn that I will be demoing with. You can also use a single ply, much like this. Preferably you would want to use a type of fiber that can be felted. If it's not feltable because of the type of building of this material, you're using short lengths of yarn because you do have to pull through. So if you are using something that doesn't felt, you will have many loose ends to tuck in. So unless you are choosing not to use wool due to some sort of allergy, do look into see if you can find some other fiber that you can felt or mesh together. So I start with a length of yarn that is approximately 2 arm widths long. You can use as long of a piece as you want to work with, and you're going to want to thread your needle. Hi, Beatrice. So when we're doing Coptic Stitch, we are going to start with a slip knot at the very end, opposite from your needle end. So if you haven't done a slip knot, you're going to wrap it around your finger so it forms almost like a cross. And then you're going to tuck one end up through the middle of your loop and pull it through. And then you take your other end and you pull it tight. And that way you create a knot that can be loosened or tightened as you see fit. So today we're going to start with the flat style of the Coptic Stitch. When you're working, Coptic Stitch is one of the few Naalbinding stitches that you can work back and forth like you would crochet or knitting. It's going to end up looking like this, which is like akin to the knitting garter stitch. This is the front and the back. It's very stretchy. It has all the same qualities of a standard Naalbinding, as in if you pull on your end, it's not going to unravel like you would see in knitting. So to start, you're going to begin. Now I'm right-handed. So if you are left-handed and you are watching this, I strongly suggest putting a mirror opposite whatever device you are using to view this so that you can see the video out of your mirror, and it'll show you basically my hand switched around, which hopefully will make it easier for you to understand how to translate it to a left-handed person. So we're going to start by taking your needle, holding your loop end with your short tail hanging down. Put your needle through your loop and pull it through. So you're going to have something that kind of looks like this. So you've pulled your needle through towards the bottom. You've got your loop up here. You're going to size your slip knot to approximately the size that you want your working stitches to be. So I'm going to bring it down a little small. So this is probably about 1/4 inch. And now that I have this loop up here, I'm going to bring my needle up through the top, through it. And it's going to end up kind of being on the side here. And you're going to bring this down till it's nearly the same size as the loop that you started with. So what we're doing is we're creating a chain, almost like you would see a chain stitch or a blanket stitch. So as you work, you're going to slowly create your chain foundation. So each time I'm going to come up and through, and we are creating our chain foundation. You're going to do this however many times as you need to create the length that you ultimately want to end up with. So today I'm just going to do a relatively short piece to give you an idea of how to work it, but still big enough for you to see what I'm doing. So I'm actually going to start with approximately 8 stitches. But because we have to turn our piece like we would with knitting or crochet, you actually will need to add an extra loop on, like crochet would, like if you were doing a single or any type of crochet. So right now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I'm going to want to create 2 more to create my base 8 foundation. So there we go. This is what my foundation chain looks like. You can see here where they've sort of overlapped each other. Now what we're going to look at is this post in the middle. Let's see here. So you're looking at this post here in the middle between the 2 loops of the chain, because this is where we're going to pass our needle through. So we always, because of the way Coptic Stitch works, if you're working right-handed, you're going to work from left to right. So here we are, we've turned our piece so that our working yarn is towards the top of our piece, and our little tail is hanging down here at the bottom. And now I'm going to take my needle, and you're going to see where these 2 stitches, we're going to go under that post from right to left and pull your needle through. All right, and you're going to do it again. Go to the next stitch to the right, go from right to left, underneath the post, and pull your needle through. That's it. That's all it takes. It's really, Coptic Stitch is probably not only is it the oldest stitch that we know at this time, but it is also less intricate than, say, the York, the Oslo, or the Mammon, which are the other stitches I have taught. So you're just going to work all the way down to your end. Once again, through your loop, under your post, right to left. As you're working, you kind of want to go back, make sure that you're getting your stitches more or less the same size. Once you've set your pattern, this will become much easier. It's only the first 2 or 3 rows that you have to sort of go back and fuss with your loops. Once you've got it well and truly started, your loops will automatically pretty much fall into line as long as you are minding your personal tension. If you're getting really stressed out while you're doing this, you will have a habit of wanting to pull it really tight, and that will mess up your piece. So do try to keep your tension relatively even. One of the things I have found while working the Coptic stitch is that if you are using a plied yarn like I am, it has a tendency to unwind your ply. So occasionally you are going to want to let your yarn untwist by taking the time to go through and like let your needle hang and untwist. So I'm going to finish up here all the way to the end of my row. So here we go. We are at the last bar of my stitch. Now, in order to turn it, we have to create a stitch. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into this last loop, and we're going to do that blanket stitch, chain stitch right here one more time to create your turning loop. So this end is your turning loop. And then you flip it over. Once more, your working yarn is at the top. You can see the top of your loops that you just created. Right here. And then between that top and the next, again, you're going to see your crosses. So once more, you can work the loops tighter across the whole piece if you would like. You can work as small as your needle can handle. So if you are using something like this, which is a relatively thin needle, you can work your loops tighter and closer together. If you're using something like this Cascade wool yarn, it has a tendency to pack itself as you work, especially if you are working in the round, which is what we'll be doing next. Because as you see when you're working in the round, it makes a much tighter weave. But if you are going to do the back and forth straight line method, you can make this as tightly packed as the width of your yarn and your needle can stand. So you want to be able to pass your needle through your loops pretty easily. You don't want to have to force it through. So if you're wanting to work in smaller loops, you certainly can, but make sure that you're using a needle that can handle that. So that's it. That's all the Coptic stitch really is. It's just moving across your piece from one side to the next in a straight line. It lends itself well to any type of flat garment that you would use anywhere else. But like I said, it doesn't unravel like you would see in knitting. The only problem I have with the Coptic stitch when you're wanting to do something like a flat piece is it does take longer than it would to knit. So if you're an avid knitter and you find it frustrating, I'm not surprised. So next we're going to move on to doing it in the round. So once more, I'm starting with a length of yarn that's approximately 2 arm lengths long. I usually work up to 3 arm lengths long. Too much more than that and you tend to tangle and get knotted. But work with whatever length that you're most comfortable with. So to work in the round, Once more, we're going to thread one end onto our needle. And we're going to create a loop at the bottom. This time though, we want to make sure that this short end is the end that we can tighten. So make sure when you tie your knot that the short end is the one that you're going to pull to tighten and loosen your beginning loop. This will come in handy because we're going to work our stitches around this loop to begin with, and then pull it tight to bring the center together. Now to work this in the round, we're going to start much the same way, except this time I'm going to have my short end out here to my left. My long end is going to come up here to the top. And I'm going to, through the loop in the middle there, and we're going to basically create a blanket, or even, some might even call it a button stitch, around our center loop. Now, depending on what you're wanting to make, will determine how many stitches you want to make, put in your loop to begin with. For a practice piece, you might want to make a small pouch, and therefore I would suggest starting with maybe 10 to 12 stitches in the middle. If you're wanting to make something like the Egyptian child sock or the toed socks that we see that were done in the Coptic Stitch, you might actually want to start with fewer for the toe, for the big toe. Something along the lines of maybe 6 stitches, maybe as few as 5. I wouldn't suggest less than that. You will need at least 5 or 6 stitches. This is 4, and if you were to pull this tight around and work from here, it would be a very tiny beginning. So unless you're working for a child sock, I wouldn't suggest 4. And once you've got your stitches around, you're probably going to want some type of stitch marker. I would suggest something like what you would use when you're crocheting. In my case, I'm actually quite fond of the open, almost C style stitch markers. So I use this style of plastic loop, enclosed loop style to mark my stitches, because we are going to have to count rounds and we're going to be adding stitches. So we've gotten around to our other side. I'm going to tuck my little loop, my little tail down here for now. So this is what it should look like to begin with. You should have a ring with your loops all the way around. Now you don't have to add a loop to turn it on this time around, because we are going in the round here. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 stitches. And to begin the next round, we're going to pass it through this stitch immediately to our right, and then through that stitch that the last stitch that we made. To create the loop for the first loop of our next round. Now, because we are wanting to create something that gets bigger as we go, we are now going to create So I'm going to start creating stitches every other stitch. So instead of going to the next cross piece, I'm going to actually go into the top of the loop that we were just working through, and I'm going to create a new stitch. This way I can double up, or double the amount of stitches that I'm working with. So by the time I am done with this round, I should have 16 stitches. That'll make my piece that much bigger. Again, you're just going to pass under your cross piece. And then create this blanket stitch in the top of that loop you were just in. And we're just going to continue to work clockwise around our piece. Until you get to the other end. You can see, if you're paying attention, you can see how the my yarn is trying to untwist itself. This is, unfortunately, a side effect of working this style if you are using a plaited yarn. Sometimes I do believe that for this type, for the Coptic stitch, using something like this, which is a single ply, will actually end up working better. But watch out, it will still want to unwind your ply. And then it'll make your yarn want to fray and come apart while you're working with it. So again, you're still going to want to keep close eye on the yarn that you're working with. And so here we go, we've gotten back to where we began. And we're going to pass through there. Create our one last create stitch. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my little short end here and I'm going to pull it to close up my center, and you'll have something that looks like this, which is almost sort of a flower or a snowflake. It's very big, you know, this is your very beginning. You can already see that we're starting to gain that garter stitch looking back and a stockinette stitch looking front. And really, this is all you're going to do to continue working. You're just going to move up to the top, to the loops, to the topmost loops. To create the third round, I'm going to do 2 crosses and then create a loop in the top so I can make each round a little bit bigger. Now, depending on the ultimate size that you're working for, you'll determine how many stitches you want to add. Unlike other types of yarn work like crochet or knit, this will want to ruffle pretty quickly. When I say ruffle, you're going to get this almost cabbage leaf effect if you build your stitches too quickly. This can be fixed easily by doing 1 or 2 rounds without adding any additions to bring it back to a flatter state. So that's all you need to do, really, to do your Coptic stitch either in the round or in it flat. Do I have any questions, or anybody would like to see something again? All right, no questions? Okay, well, there is my handout that was located in my original post. You are welcome to utilize that. It does have the flat stitch and the beginnings on it. I will still working on in the round version. I will be doing a sock making basics using the Coptic stitch fairly shortly. I'm almost done getting that set up. So if anybody is interested in how to turn the Coptic stitch into that really cool Egyptian sock, I will walk you through the process and show you some of the things that you would need to do, including the techniques you will need to create it. Is there anybody who just logged on that would like me to go back either through the straight stitch or the round stitch? Okay, folks. Well, thank you so much for sharing your afternoon with me. Look out for for further posts leading you to how to make a sock with the Coptic stitch. Oh, I'm happy to hear that, Cindy. You all are very welcome. I will be doing this again.